gone back to drinking 4 bottles of Dr. Pepper a day, haven't you?
York, nothing comes without experimentation, and you know it.
Experimentation, my foot. Of all the ideas you've had, 7 different movies from one series in one video. I mean, you've had stupid ideas before.
Well, see, that's why I'm the brains and you're basically the channel mascot.
The only reason people think I'm your mascot is because I'm the only one with any sort of fucking character.
Well then, just let me keep doing the thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to do something that I have not done before. See, I've discussed movies, and I've discussed subjects pertaining to movies, but I've never done an entire series worth of movies in one entire video. And I figured I'd change that up. And considering it's Halloween, I wear this every year, I felt like I would discuss the one franchise that would actually justify me wearing this thing. So we're gonna talk about every single Nightmare on Elm Street movie to date.
What, you're doing all of them? Even Freddy vs. Jason?
I'm not counting Freddy vs. Jason, mostly because I don't consider that a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I also have a hard time considering it a Friday the 13th movie, to be perfectly honest. It's kind of a weird mix between the two. Regardless, though, aside from that one, we're going to be doing all of them.
Either you're going to flounder around, or Warner Brothers is just going to block this entire video. Either way, it will be fun to see your reaction to this.
Of the entire Nightmare on Elm Street saga, in terms of quality, Nightmare 1 is probably my favorite. Because out of all of the Nightmare movies in the entire series, Nightmare 1 is the most mysterious with its setup. Now I know that sounds overtly obvious in hindsight, considering it's the first movie. We don't know anything about this guy because there hasn't been a character like this before. But the difference between this slasher movie in comparison to every other slasher movie, there isn't seemingly right off the bat an explanation. With something like Friday the 13th, there's almost an easy explanation right off the bat. That being, psychotic mother blames these random teens for her kid's death. And you can kind of make that argument that the teens are setting themselves up for that kind of thing. But with Nightmare on Elm Street, it seems like they haven't initially done anything wrong to deserve this. I mean, yes, there is a stereotypical fuckhead jock character introduced in the first 10 minutes, but what I mean is that there's seemingly nothing to prompt the appearance of Freddy right off the bat. Just 10-15 minutes into this movie, he shows up, and it takes us about 3 minutes into the sequence to even realize that she's still dreaming. What this movie excels at is build up in anticipation of revealing what the monster is. And more importantly, it establishes a significant edge that Freddy has over every other slasher villain. And that edge is that you cannot run from Freddy. You can run from Jason. You can run from Leatherface. In fact, in the end of the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of them jumps into the back of a truck and just leaves. This isn't a knock against those two films, by the way. I actually do like Texas Chainsaw Massacre a lot. But Freddy is not your typical slasher villain. He is a specter of the dream world. He comes for you in your sleep. He is an angry, vengeful demon that can only invade your mind in your sleep, where he preys upon you in your subconscious, using your own insecurities and fears against you to break you. And then, only then, does he kill you. Well then, the obvious solution, director, is to just not sleep. But is it really that simple? The human body requires sleep to function. You can try and fight it all you want, but it doesn't make any difference. Eventually, you will succumb to sleep deprivation. You will go to sleep, and when you do, Freddy will be right there waiting for you. To me, at the very least, that's what makes Freddy so goddamn unique, and I think the first movie plays into the mystery of that so goddamn well. These aren't the most creative kills in the series, but they didn't need to be. The fact that he could kill you in your sleep in such a gruesome manner to make it look like somebody else did it, or could make it look like a suicide attempt, or some other methods that I'll mention in later entries as they become relevant. Just the fact alone that he'll kill you and no one in the real world will even know that it's him is what makes it seem like such a despairing attempt to even stop him. On the downside, there is some spotty acting here and there, but it doesn't last too long. And notably, this is one of the earlier roles from Johnny Depp. I dock him points though, because sometimes he'll mumble his lines and it's kind of annoying.
You shut up and let me in.
You really shouldn't mumble.
But overall, Nightmare 1 is a perfect starting point for this series. And hell, if it had gone with its original ending, it probably would have just been a perfect standalone film. But we know how the story goes. When something is popular the first time, we're bound to see it again real soon.
Okay, I used to work for fucking Shakespeare, and even I think you're being more dramatic than necessary.
That doesn't mean I can't mix things up. We have an audience to entertain, after all.
You say entertain like you're a fucking professional or something. If you had anything further to deal with aside from me, you would lose your absolute mind.
Trust me, you are more than a handful. I doubt anything more would be more significant.
Well then, I'm glad I showed up when I did.
Nope. I know that voice. I know that music cue. I am not dealing with this. This is the 1 year where things are finally working out. I am not dealing with Okay, that's good.
Hey, at least I'm wearing a mask, right?
Yeah, clearly.
You never know how these people are. You don't know if they're asymptomatic, so that's why I'm sitting here.
Oh yay, something good to actually come from the year.
As to the other two people in this room, someone wanna fill me in on who this is?
I won't cut my potential fun-filled life short due to some asshole who doesn't want to wear a mask.
Aren't you like over 700 or some shit?
725.
Wow, okay, well, she could look a lot worse for someone who's centuries old.
Yeah, she could look like you.
I'll have you know I was within the prime of my youth before my untimely death. I had the audience within my grasp every performance.
Oh yes, I'm sure you had all the men in the audience swooning over you.
I did, and I still got more tail than you ever would.
Most horror movies have a bit of a problem following up with a second movie in their series. See, sometimes a series might be famous, or infamous, for progressively increasing the scale of things as time goes on, but the second movie is always kind of a misdemeanor in all of that. It's never as quite as impressive as the first one was, but it's also not like the rest of the series that would follow it. Saw is almost a perfect example of this paradigm. The first movie is a perfect demonstration of how you can make a horror movie with almost no budget at all, whereas Saw 3 through 7 are notoriously infamous for making its story even more convoluted with each new entry. However, Saw 2 is the only movie that doesn't contribute to this problem, and I would argue that's why it's easily the least enjoyable in the entire series. It's not quite as tense or as enjoyable as the first movie, but the story hasn't become so laughably convoluted yet, so it's just kind of a boring mess. And you would think, with Nightmare following a similar pattern, I'd be saying the same thing about Nightmare 2. However, there is a little bit of an edge that Nightmare 2 has that keeps it from falling into this trap. One that I would argue makes it the funniest entry in the entire series. Because if you're willing to read into the subtext of this movie, and I say this with no derogatory meaning intended, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, is gay as hell.
What?
I can't believe something that filthy just came out of your mouth.
What did I say that was derogatory?
You said Nightmare 2 was gay as hell.
It is.
Well, I never.
Okay, clearly I need new context. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 has the most homoerotic subtext.
I mean, come on, the main actor was a then closeted homosexual who is now out. Robert Englund himself interpreted it as a bisexual themed film, but what's most important is that the writer, David Chaskin, has openly admitted in 2010 that the homosexual themes in Nightmare 2 were completely intentional.
You know, we've always pussyfooted around this. Look, it was supposed to be subtext. You have to remember again, this was the 1980s, this was post-AIDS, and I started thinking about guys being like unsure of their sexuality. And I thought, well, that's pretty scary.
And I don't mean any of this as a knock against Nightmare 2. In fact, it's because of that I actually kind of fucking love it. I mean, just look at the coach's death scene in this movie. You're gonna tell me this scene right here was solely conceived by a straight man in the fucking 80s? But in full honesty, does it not sound like something in Freddy's character to toy with someone who's struggling with their own sexuality? The fact that Freddy is trying to overtake this kid from the inside out, is that not terrifying enough on its own? Does that not sound like something Freddy would do? When you start adding this subtextual analysis to the film, it's only then that the horror does actually work. Even better than on its own. I mean, it does seem a little weird that Freddy's running around a pool with people who are much larger than him and they're actually running terrified. That seems a little odd. But this is an idea that I would love to see explored more in future Nightmare movies, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there, so I'll come back to that later.
Jesse, who is doing this to you?
Fred Krueger! He's inside me, and he wants to take me again!
All I can say is we were all incredibly naive, or all incredibly latently gay. I'm not sure which.
But here I am praising the edges of the horror. You're probably wondering why I said this is the most hilarious one in the entire series. Well, it's not funny on its own, mind you, but let me ask you something. If you've already been aware of the subtext of this movie, have you ever tried telling that to a conservative fan of this movie? If you haven't, I suggest you try it, because they always seem to lose their collective shit when you do it.
The real deal with the subtext, Freddy toying with that boy's sexuality. What?
And that, ladies and gentlemen, will always be funny to me. Just for future reference, keep this in your back pocket, because we will be coming back to this later.
I'll get you, and I'll look like a bloody accident.
And this is where things start getting stupid.
It's not stupid when I came in.
Believe me, my dear, if it's stupid, it's entirely his fault.
You're not helping.
Nightmare 3 is considered to be a fan favorite amongst the majority, but I'm gonna be honest with you, Nightmare 3 is where things start getting kinda stupid. Not bad stupid, we're not there yet. Give it time. This is more of a self-aware camp level of stupid that is still very enjoyable. In fact, as far as entertainment value goes, this one probably has the top spot. From what I can tell, the mentality going into this movie was, well, we've exhausted every possible mysterious factor of Freddy that we can possibly think of, so let's make him the key star. From Nightmare 3 onward, these movies became about three things and three things only. Number 1, who was Freddy going to kill? Number 2, how was he going to kill them? And number 3, what lame-ass pun was he gonna use when he did it? Ladies and gentlemen, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, was the beginning of the ultimate punishment.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
Skip it about and that
What's wrong, Joey? Feeling tongue-tied? What a rush! It's back. In the saddle. Again.
So if I'm being perfectly honest, Freddy would not be Freddy without this kind of dynamic. I mean, come on, he can kill people using their own psyche. It was bound to turn into a comedy at some point. But for what it's worth, this movie does hold the record for starting also the trend of some of the most gruesome deaths in all of slasher movies. Like the scene where Philip has his tendons ripped out of his arms and legs and then dragged around like a marionette. That's kind of fucking creepy. But this is also the part in the series where they actually started having fun with this idea instead of taking it entirely too seriously. And hey, we saw the return of Heather Langenkamp as Nancy from the first movie, so it has some connection. But all in all, while Nightmare 3 is unquestionably stupid, it is still the very entertaining stupid that still makes it one of my favorites to watch from an entertainment standard.
Okay, now's where things start getting stupid.
Oh, like they weren't before?
Well, now we're at the point where it's not clearly yet still enjoyable stupid to refusing to wear a mask in public because of personal freedom stupid.
I agree, that's annoying.
Yeah.
Now that transition may confuse a couple of you people, but there's a good reason why I did it. It's because Part 4 and Part 5 of A Nightmare on Elm Street, I basically have the exact same criticisms for. Now granted, they aren't entirely the same movie, the two of them, but I do share a lot of criticisms between them. Part 4, The Dream Masters, basically just undoes all of the work the third movie did and just has Freddy going on another killing spree. And Part 5 has a character returning from that pregnant with a child, and Freddy wants to become that child. I think it's kind of operating on Ghostbusters 2 rules. But aside from the two plots being different, they actually suffer from the exact same problems. Both have a really hard pacing issue right in the middle of the film. Both of the methods of which they have to deal with Freddy are kind of convoluted. Oh yeah, and both of them either have very uninteresting kills or very, very, very stupid kills. Like for both Part 4 and Part 5, there's one kill that is absolutely grotesque. Like Part 4 has a woman being turned into a cockroach, and Part 5 has a woman being force-fed to the point of overstuffed, literally. But the rest of them just seem kinda uncreative for Freddy. Either that or just...
Faster than a bastard maniac. More powerful than a local madman. It's Super Freddy!
Yeah, whatever the hell that was. But both of these movies just feel like they were just made to capitalize on the popularity of the series. Like, I can't shake that feeling from these two. It's kind of like, you know, you watch the original Star Wars movies or the prequel Star Wars movies, and you can tell there's at least some kind of interest or passion out of it, but, like, the sequel series is undeniably made for money. That's kind of how I feel about 4 and 5 of Nightmare. And I will give credit where credit is due. 4 actually did give me really bad feelings about waterbeds. Honestly, aside from that, I really don't have much to say about Part 4 and 5, which is kind of why I lumped them together. But nothing lasts forever, and eventually, even legends have to die. In a way, the title for A Nightmare on Elm Street 6 is almost poetic. At this point in time, it's very obvious that they've run out of ideas, so the moniker of Freddy's Dead could also be applied to the idea of Freddy as well. As if the makers of the film themselves are saying, okay, he's dead, the idea has been dried up, we're not doing this again, please leave us alone. Because aside from actually delving into Freddy's origin, this movie has barely anything to offer in terms of entertainment, and in comparison to Nightmare 4 and 5, where one had just stupid kills and the other one had uninspired kills, this one has both stupid and uninspired kills. Like, he kills one guy in a video game by dropping him off a cliff and then just says,
Beat my high score.
I'd make a joke about the power glove, but I don't know, I think there's just something funny about putting an uninspired idea in a movie that is itself thematically an uninspired idea. And speaking of uninspired ideas, there's also a section of this movie that apparently at the time of its theatrical release was meant to be viewed in 3D, I guess? Like, they have an in-universe explanation for why the main character has to wear 3D glasses when she goes to sleep.
Get the hell out of here.
Like, I'm pretty sure Spy Kids 3D had a better setup than this. And if your idea can be beaten by Spy Kids 3D... I know a lot of people who talk about this movie seem to blame the director for that, and I can't imagine why they would, but I guess it should be noted that she also would inevitably be the director behind that shitty adaptation of Tank Girl. So make of that one what you will, I guess. Bottom line though, Freddy's Dead was definitely a dead on arrival, no pun intended. It was clearly meant just to end the series as best as they possibly could, and at this rate, I wouldn't blame them if it was a mercy killing.
Skip it up and that up.
And you would think that'd be the end of it, but it's not.
Well, but they exhausted every idea they have. How can they go further if they have no material?
Yes, it does seem like they're stretching it out a little bit.
Yeah, and if I'm being perfectly honest, this is kind of where things get hard to explain.
Well, there's no way you can go any further without completely shattering the fourth wall.
Well, then elaborate for us, Director. What exactly about this is so hard to explain,
Well, for lack of a better term, things just get downright fucking weird here.
Nightmare 1, 2, and 3 all have a number 1 ranked for me in terms of enjoyment. First one for quality, second one for subtext, and third one for entertainment. New Nightmare also has a #1 ranking, but it's for the most, bizarre Nightmare movie. I mean, I couldn't exactly tell you offhand what went through the heads of the creators when they came up with this idea, because when I say it's bizarre, it's really fucking bizarre. Like, the movie doesn't follow characters from the Nightmare series, it follows the actors who have played characters in the Nightmare series. Like, Heather Langenkamp is back, but she's as herself in this movie. And the story specifically follows her and the world around her. Robert Englund is in it as himself, but he's also playing Freddy at the same time. Wes Craven himself is in it, and he's writing a script for a new movie, and the movie we're watching is happening at the same time he's writing his script. Like I said, this movie's really fucking bizarre, and I cannot explain to you offhand why. Like, very clearly this is meant to be a fan servicey type of movie, considering it is a 10th anniversary film, but also its bizarre nature and its ambiguous setups and endings are just kinda weird. Of course, when you learn that Heather Langenkamp in real life actually had a stalker and told Wes Craven about it, and Wes Craven got her permission to weave that into an actual story, it does make sense a little bit.
As it turns out, a stalker that had started, calling Heather at all odd hours and threatening her life, turned out to be a fan who was ticked off because the series had been stopped. And it struck me as such an incredible irony that everybody had been telling me my whole career that what you're writing is bad and it's going to make people want to go out and kill somebody.
And so this idea, I think, was maybe some food for Wes's thought process.
Wes came to me and said he'd been talking to Heather, how if he could delve into her private life and put some of it on the screen, and would I mind if he screwed around with me a little bit?
There was a theme of how this movie that we had all participated in had kind of haunted our lives, and in a sense made it like we could not be something totally different from that film ever.
But in all honesty, this would actually make for a decent conclusion to a Nancy-led trilogy of Nightmare on Elm Street movies. This would be the third and final movie Nancy appeared. But I still can't forgive it because it does have some major pacing issues in the second third of the movie, and it doesn't pick back up until Freddy actually shows up. But given the dream-weaving nature of Freddy Krueger himself, and that we wouldn't be seeing much of him for a little while, I guess it was kind of proper that they ended on such a bizarre note.
Well then, seeing as that was the last one in the series, I guess that means you're finally through with this, aren't you?
Not quite.
Wait, what?
There's still one last thing I gotta do.
But you covered everything. There's nothing left.
What on earth could you possibly have left to do?
I have to finish what I started.
I've already talked about this movie once before, but it was only upon reviewing the entire original Nightmare series that I realized that I got some things wrong in that old review. For example, when I was referencing Freddy in the original movies in comparison to something that happened in the remake, I said this:
Freddy Krueger was not a child molester. He was a child killer.
Yeah, I don't know why I said that, because that's just completely fucking wrong. How could you fuck up something that simple, you moron?
You fucking bitch!
Like Nightmare 4 with the fucking asthma kid.
Wanna suck the face?
No.
How did I not remember that? But more importantly with that review, there was something that I realized that I failed to mention when it came to the remake, and it's something that I didn't realize that I missed until I was looking at this old series. Why the hell did the remake not feel like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie? And I think I finally know why it didn't. You look at the remake and you can barely see anything, it's dark, it's edited kinda choppy, all the characters are very unlikable, Freddy himself is uncharismatic.
How's this for a wet dream?
While I was editing this scene into this particular bit, I realized they used the same scream soundbite twice. The plot is basically just a repeat of the original movie, but I think the biggest problem with the remake is that it doesn't feel like it has a soul to it. Despite the good and bad footnotes of the original Nightmare series, one thing is unmistakable across all 7 of them. Someone was having fun when they made it. Wes Craven certainly was, and hell, he wasn't even expecting to. The guy wanted to make rom-coms before he did these. You can tell Robert Englund, the guy who played Freddy Krueger, absolutely had a blast playing the character, otherwise he wouldn't be so ecstatic to constantly reprise his role all the time.
Adam said he wished I wasn't his mother.
Oh, jeez, that's an awful thing to say. I'ma kill him!
No.
And let's face it, Johnny Depp got his start with the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And if that movie wasn't successful, we might not have Johnny Depp today.
He's always been very sweet about acknowledging that I gave him a start.
What was your role in Nightmare on Elm Street?
I played Glenn.
And what happened to Glenn?
I got sucked into a bed.
And the thing is, unlike the original series, which is still being talked about even after its inception 35 years ago, no one even remembers the remake now. Hell, I barely did when it first came up. I honestly only did the remake because one of my commenters came up with the idea. Yeah, you thought I had that plan, didn't you? What do you think I am, a professional? But if we're being completely honest, there is nothing about this remake that is memorable. There is no soul to it. Not even Freddy himself looks like he's having any fun with it. This is entirely a, hey, that shitty remake of Friday the 13th made gangbusters last year, let's make one for Nightmare on Elm Street now. And that's what makes it so detrimental to the entire series. It has no passion, and that's something you need from a Nightmare movie. Which brings me to my last point. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the entire reason why I decided to talk about Nightmare on Elm Street in the first place. Meet The Quartering, a channel with nearly 1 million subscribers who, upon observation, seems to mostly talk about right-wing politics. Now, as most of my regular viewers know that I joke about several times already, I am not a political channel. I don't discuss politics unless it's brought up by the media I'm discussing, and honestly, I'd rather make fun of stupid ideas or remarks first before even getting into politics.
Guess what I am?
yeah, that's funny.
Vote for Donald Trump.
None of that.
Vote for him or you're a communist.
You're not helping.
So why then, pray tell, would I even bring up The Quartering in the first place? Well, it's all because of this video he decided to make about approximately 3 to 4 months ago. A video with the title of Freddy Krueger Gets Woke, a shockingly bad idea for horror films, in which The Quartering looks over an interview with Robert Englund about his personal ideas for where the series could go, and then proceeds to have a characteristic shit fit about them. Characteristic enough that it inspired me to talk about the series just so I can make fun of the guy. Well, let's be fair, that's not the entire reason. Honestly, I wanted to do a segment at the end talking about my ideas for where the series could go, and upon seeing The Quartering's video, it actually gave me a few ideas. So we're going to use The Quartering's videos as a catalyst to discuss those ideas, which also happens to entail making fun of this guy's characteristic shit fits.
It says Robert Englund claims the next Freddy film should toy with a kid's sexuality and have a focus on the opioid crisis. What? What? No! No, 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 no.
I love how he's acting like he's disciplining a dog for shitting on the carpet or something. No, no, no. No!
No! No! No!
In their discussion about Freddy, 2Fab asked what the disconnect between modern audiences and old school 1980s horror film was. Nothing! If you like horror films, then you should be watching exclusively horror films made in the 80s. That was a golden era for horror and suspense.
Well, I don't know, that's kind of discrediting movies that were made in like the 2000s, like The Ring, Paranormal Activity. I mean, there are plenty of examples of movies made past the 1980s and even the 90s for that matter that are actually good horror movies. I mean, yeah, there's been more shit ones, but there were also some shit ones in the 80s too. Some of them, in fact, even part of the same franchise. Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, Jason Takes Manhattan, Halloween 4. It's not like horror died when the 80s ended.
Details of the new Freddy film would have to focus on today's society. Nope. Nope. I don't want to see Freddy Krueger invading TikTok. Nobody wants to see that.
That's the one thing you jump to? I don't want to see Freddy on TikTok? I mean, he's had dumber kills before, granted, but when you really think about that for a second, we're playing into some idea here But let's let him go on for a little bit and see where he goes with this.
Hollywood doesn't know how to make, United States Hollywood, I should say, doesn't know how to make good horror films anymore.
Has he not even been paying attention to horror films for the last 5 years at the very least? We've had both the It movies. We had Get Out.
And don't give me that Jordan Peele's films were good. They were grossly overrated.
Overrated? Maybe Us. Strange that I would mention Get Out and then you immediately bring out the Jordan Peele thing. Get Out is a good example of a subversion of audience expectations, which is something that you need to do with fucking horror.
Because our society is now more damaged because of the opioid crisis. Because of the incredible diverse, those kids now have to be different than the kids from the original Nightmare. He added, evil needs to be, he needs to toy with what they like in the culture. So like Freddy Krueger will now come in the form of cancel culture? Is that what it is? Like, hey kids, looks like you sent out a spicy tweet while you were asleep.
You might actually be onto something there. Let's explore that idea a little bit. Let's say we have a character, a teen, who is completely infatuated with everything related to social media. Everything about their character boils down to the likes, the reception that they get off of social media. It is their life. It has encompassed every single facet of their entire being. They don't give a shit about anything else. All they care about is the exposure. What do you think Freddy would do to someone like that in their dream? I think they would do exactly what the quartering here just suggested. They would make that person feel insecure about their entire internet exposure. It would make them think that they sent out some kind of spicy tweet or maybe a cringe TikTok, and he keeps piling that on. He makes it look like to that victim, everything that they tried to build up with social media is now crumbling around them, turning on them, pointing fingers at them, saying, you're cringe now, you're awful, and they're held to trial, sentenced to death, and immediately sent to the gallows. Keep in mind, they're in the dream world. And with Freddy as the executioner, they're hung. Now what's going on in the real world is that people are looking at this victim's social media and they're sending out a bunch of very, very hyper tweets or posts. They're saying stuff like, I can't take this anymore, I didn't deserve this, I want to die. And then when they go to see how she's doing, they find her and she's hung herself. So see, that plays into Freddy toying with someone's insecurity, but it also toys into the one thing I mentioned when talking about the movies, making it look like a suicide, so no one suspects Freddy. He's trying to make this seem like a bad idea, but in full honesty, if you're going to make a Nightmare remake, that's the one thing you absolutely should do. That kill would be fan-fucking-tastic.
If they redid Nightmare 2, for instance, the real deal with the subtext, Freddy toying with that boy's sexuality. What?
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 Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
Nobody wants to see that movie. Nobody.
Unfortunately for you, though, one, that movie already exists, and it's a lot of people's favorite, mine included. And secondly, you're kind of dismissing the idea that Freddy would do something like this. That's something that I pointed out that I got wrong about the remake, is that he wasn't a pedophile. He absolutely was a pedophile. He took advantage of children and then killed them. The sexuality is not the main thing that Freddy focuses on. It's the pleasure that he gets from taking advantage of children like this, manipulating them, breaking them, and then killing them. He gets his kicks from shit like this. So no shit, he would want to try something like that. It makes perfect sense.
He then detailed that the film could include an autistic actor. Get an autistic actor and really play with how Freddy would torment him. No, this sounds terrible.
I don't know how a lot of audiences would react to having a character who's autistic, but it would fall in line with something for Freddy. See, that's the thing. I want to entertain the idea, but I don't think I have the brevity to even approach how they would even play that out. There's different levels of autism. They could approach it one way or another. There's plenty of possibilities there. But I don't think we should dismiss that entirely. See, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to experiment with ideas, and I'm just using this garbage video as a catalyst to try to do that.
It's just, yes, you can modernize it, but could you imagine Freddy Krueger putting out, like, getting on someone's, like, Twitter feed and making a spicy joke?
Actually, yeah, I could imagine that. In fact, I just did imagine that a moment ago. Wouldn't that be so neat? Someone scrolling through their own profile, seeing all the tweets they've seemingly posted without realizing, and then they, Twitter shows those promoted ads in between one of them, but the promoted ad is like a video of Freddy starting to fuck with them, but it's not like a pre-recorded video, it's like actually Freddy fucking with them, because, it's the dream. It's a dream world. It makes sense!
I want to hear from you. What do you think of Robert Englund said? Well, he's an idiot. No, I'm not going to say that. Robert Englund has earned his place at the table, obviously, to talk about this, especially this franchise, but this is just a very, very bad take.
Okay, you want to know what makes this so significant? If we're really breaking down to this, Robert Englund is not a writer for Nightmare on Elm Street. He never was. Robert Englund was not the writer, he was just the guy who played Freddy Krueger. He's an actor, and more importantly, he's the actor who brought Freddy to life for around 20-30 years at least. So if anyone is going to have any input on how Freddy is used as a character, considering that the man who created Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven, is now 6 feet under, I think the first person to have some kind of authority over that would be the fucking guy who played him. As if fucking TikTok has anything to do with making Freddy cringe or not. He's already made the Power Glove joke. How much more cringe could he possibly get? But let's let that conversation drag us on to something new. Minimize this. We have ourselves examples of how we could toy with something in social media. But let's take that even further, since Quartering over here didn't really want to entertain the idea. What would happen if he toyed with someone who was struggling with their sexuality? What if someone who was in the closet was invaded by Freddy in their dreams? Would that not yield some kind of potential? Or even further, what if we took it to the next step? Bear with me here. What if Freddy were to invade the mind of someone who's suffering from gender dysphoria? They themselves are struggling with their own identity. Would definitely be something that a child killer would take advantage of, wouldn't you think? Or if we were to take it even further, what if a guy's parents are getting divorced, which is happening even more now than they did in the 80s. Again, the opioid crisis that he mentioned, which is an epidemic that is still an issue. We've had the coronavirus become a significant issue of the 2020s. What if we have a health freak who is absolutely obsessed with everything to do with the pandemic invaded by Freddy? What would happen then? There's so many potential ideas you could do with a new remake, but to be perfectly honest, the only way to approach it is doing the thing that the remake didn't do, and that's with passion. You see, you could probably do a good Nightmare on Elm Street movie if you really wanted to. Honestly, I would love to see the director of the It movies take on something like that, because have you seen the shit that was in It? That's perfect nightmare fuel on its own. But yeah, that pretty much wraps that part up.
Azula is coming back, right? She's coming back at some point, right?
Oh, I won't be coming back for your sake.
Oh, why not? Am I not so tired?
I just like men that have a little bit more life in them.
Oh, you ableist, you.
Hang on a second. How do I know I'm not dreaming this time?
What do you mean, director?
Last time it looked like you invaded my dreams. How do I know I'm not dreaming this time?
Well, director, this is the 4th year I've been here. You should probably know me better by now.
Why are you suddenly so concerned with continuity? Why is the camera panning away? You're not even gonna give this a proper ending, are you? You're just